Who left a child in my terminal at this hour? Those were the first words out of Billionaire airport owner Griffin Lowell as he stopped mid-stride inside Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport. It was nearly 2 a.m., the kind of hour when even the walls felt tired, when the hum of the fluorescent lights sounded louder than the footsteps on the polished floor. And there, on a cold metal bench near gate C14, lay a tiny shape curled beneath a faded peach-colored hoodie, like she was trying to disappear into herself. Most people walk past things that make them uncomfortable. But Griffin wasn't most people. He stepped closer. The girl didn't move. Not when he paused at the end of the bench. Not when he leaned down slightly to see her face. It wasn't until he accidentally kicked a fallen vending machine snack wrapper that she jolted awake. Her eyes wide, her breathing sharp, her hand clutching her dusty backpack like it carried her whole world. I'm sorry, she whispered, already sitting up and pulling her knees in. I'll go. I promise. I'll leave right now. Her voice trembled, but there was something else in it too. Something Griffin wasn't prepared for. He froze, not because she was scared, but because her voice hit him like a memory he thought he'd buried. A voice he should not have recognized. A voice that brought back a loss he never healed from. For a moment, the entire terminal felt suspended in air. Just Griffin. Just the girl. And that impossible sound. She kept apologizing, her words rushing over themselves as if she expected punishment for simply being alive in the wrong place. Griffin raised a hand gently. You're not in trouble, he said softly. You're safe. What's your name? She hesitated. Her fingers tightened around the straps of her backpack. Malia, she whispered. Malia Carter. It didn't help him breathe any easier. Before he could ask another question, 2 airport security officers approached from behind, their radios crackling. Sir, is this the child you reported? One asked. Griffin didn't even look at them. No one touches her, he said firmly. She's with me. Shock washed over the officers' faces. Malia's too. She shook her head slowly, backing away like he had just made things worse. I'm not supposed to talk to you, she whispered. And that was the moment the air changed again, heavy, electric, full of danger. Because someone had warned her about him, and she wasn't lying. Her words didn't land softly, they crashed. Griffin stared at this trembling 13-year-old girl, trying to understand how she could possibly know anything about him. But her fear wasn't random. It was practiced. Almost rehearsed. The officers exchanged looks. Mr. Lowell, is there a problem? One asked carefully. Griffin forced his voice steady. Give us a moment. Step back. They did, but reluctantly. Their radios kept chirping updates about flickering cameras on this side of the terminal. Electrical issues. System errors. Nothing that should happen in a place this secure. Malia slid to the edge of the bench, ready to run at the slightest movement. Griffin crouched just enough to meet her eyes without crowding her. I need you to tell me who said that, he said gently. Who told you not to talk to me? She shook her head fast. I can't. They said you'd try to trick me. They said you'd pretend to help. The words sliced deeper than she knew. Griffin swallowed. And do you believe them? Malia hesitated, just long enough to reveal her confusion. Her eyes darted to the dim overhead lights, then to the exit, then back to her backpack, like it held every answer she couldn't say out loud. I don't know what to believe anymore, she whispered. A sudden flicker rippled through the lights, darker and longer this time. One of the officers muttered into his radio, calling for maintenance. Griffin's focus never left Malia. Listen, he said, his voice low and steady. Whoever talked to you, they don't get to decide what's true. You do. And right now, I just want to help. But Malia didn't soften. She pulled the backpack into her lap and hugged it tight. I shouldn't even be here, she murmured. And if they find out I talked to you, they'll be angry. Griffin's breath halted. Angry? Who were they? He didn't get to ask. The hallway behind them echoed with a sharp metallic click, like someone unlocking a door they weren't supposed to touch. One of the security officers turned abruptly. Sir, we have movement in the restricted wing. Griffin stood. Malia stood too. And for the first time, fear wasn't the only thing in her eyes. There was warning. Because someone was already inside the terminal. Someone who didn't want this conversation happening at all. If you enjoy stories like these, grab yourself a popcorn, sit back, hit the subscribe button, and get ready for a wild ride. The metallic click echoed again, sharper this time, bouncing off the empty walls of the concourse like a signal no one wanted to acknowledge. The officers stiffened. Malia flinched. Griffin felt a familiar chill crawl up the back of his neck, a feeling he hadn't felt since the night everything in his life fell apart. Stay behind me, he told Malia gently, though the girl looked like she was ready to sprint in any direction that led away from all of this. But she didn't run. She just held onto her backpack as if the straps were lifelines. The taller officer pressed his earpiece. Control, we need confirmation on who accessed door 7B. That wing should be sealed. Static answered him. Just static. Griffin's eyes narrowed. Our internal system never glitches without a reason. He didn't add the rest, unless someone forced it. Malia's breathing quickened. She kept glancing toward the far end of the terminal where softer shadows pooled under the emergency lights. She didn't need to say it, her whole body said it for her. She recognized the danger. Are they looking for you? Griffin asked quietly. Her lips parted, but her voice never came. Instead, she stepped backward, her sneakers barely making a sound on the smooth tile floor. Her face turned slightly toward that shadowed maintenance door behind them, the one that had been cracked open only moments before. Griffin followed her gaze. The door was shut now. Too neatly shut. The shorter officer moved toward it. I'll check. No, Griffin ordered. We moved together. But he was too late to stop the first step. The officer's hand touched the handle, and the overhead lights flickered violently, plunging the corridor into 2 full seconds of darkness. 2 seconds where anything could move. 2 seconds where anything could step closer. When the lights snapped back on, the officer was still standing, but the maintenance door was slightly open again. Only this time a faint outline, a silhouette, leaned just beyond it. Watching. Malia pressed against the bench, whispering, "They're not supposed to be here yet." Griffin's heart dropped. Who? He asked. She closed her eyes, struggling to breathe. The ones who told me not to talk to you. And that shadow behind the door stepped back, as if preparing for something far worse. Griffin motioned for the officers to form a protective arc, but Malia stayed frozen, clutching her backpack so tightly that her knuckles turned pale. Her fear wasn't normal. It wasn't the kind a kid felt when caught somewhere she shouldn't be. This was fear that had been earned. Fear taught. Malia, Griffin said softly, what's in the bag? Her eyes darted from him to the shadows, then back. She didn't answer at first, not because she didn't want to, but because she didn't know if she should. The girl looked torn between 2 worlds she didn't trust. Finally, with trembling hands, she slid the zipper open. The sound felt impossibly loud in the silent terminal. Each inch unzipped like a countdown to something none of them were ready for. Inside the backpack were folders. Dozens of them. Thick, overstuffed, worn around the edges like they'd been carried across states, cities, maybe years. And on top, creased, smudged but unmistakable, was Griffin Lowell's name. Not printed. Not typed. Signed. Except. Griffin had never seen these documents in his life. What is this? he whispered. Malia swallowed hard. I didn't steal them. I swear. They were already with my things when I woke up 2 nights ago. Woke up where? Griffin asked gently. She shook her head. I don't know the name. It was a warehouse. Cold. They said we were moving soon. They said. A sharp tremor ran through her as she bit down on her words. Griffin lifted one of the papers. It wasn't just a basic contract. It was a forged acquisition agreement. It claimed he planned to transfer a major portion of his airport's revenue stream to a private investor. An investor he'd spent years fighting against. Someone was framing him. And they were using a child to do it. The shorter officer exhaled. Sir, if these hit the media? They won't, Griffin snapped, though his voice cracked with the weight of uncertainty. Not until I know who planted them. Malia stepped forward. I tried to throw them away, she whispered. But they always showed up again. Even when I changed places. Even when I hid. Again. This wasn't random. Before Griffin could ask more, the airport alarms blared, harsh, echoing, pulsing through the concourse like a warning siren no one could ignore. The officer spun around. Security breach, Sector C. The shadow behind the maintenance door vanished. Malia gasped. They're coming back. The lights flickered, once, twice. Then the entire terminal went black. And in the darkness, Griffin finally understood. This wasn't a coincidence. Someone had planned every second of this night. The darkness didn't last long, only 6 seconds, but it felt like 6 minutes inside Griffin's chest. When the emergency lights flickered back on, their dim red glow washed the terminal in a haunting, unfinished kind of light. Everything looked the same, yet nothing felt the same. Malia stood perfectly still. Not shaking. Not crying. Not screaming. Just still, like someone who had learned long ago that staying quiet could save her life. Griffin took a slow breath. Malia, he said gently, I need to understand what you've been running from. She didn't answer right away. She hugged her backpack the way other kids hugged stuffed animals. It was her shield, her comfort, her last piece of safety. You said you woke up in a warehouse, he continued softly. But before that, before all of this, where were you living? Her shoulders rose, then fell like the question hurt more than anything else tonight. I don't really live anywhere, she whispered. Not for long. Every place is temporary. Every adult says it's just for a little while. She paused, eyes drifting toward the far end of the concourse. And then, things changed. Griffin felt a tightness in his throat. What changed? They started watching me, she said, her small voice steadying as if she'd repeated this story to herself but never aloud. Everywhere I went. Every house I stayed in. They always knew where I was. Even when the family changed, the rules didn't. What rules? Malia looked up at him, her deep eyes holding exhaustion far too old for a 13-year-old. I wasn't allowed to ask questions. I wasn't allowed to talk about where I came from. I wasn't allowed to talk to anyone rich or powerful. And they told me, her voice faltered. They told me people like you were dangerous. Griffin swallowed hard. And you believed them? At first, she admitted. Because they always came back for me. No matter where I moved. The officers exchanged troubled glances. Griffin stepped closer, not enough to crowd her, but enough to show her he wasn't leaving. What did you want, Malia? Before all this? The question seemed to surprise her. I wanted normal, she said softly. A school where I didn't have to leave mid-semester. A friend whose number I didn't have to memorize because I knew I'd lose my phone. A place where my shoes didn't get worn out from running. She looked down at those shoes now, frayed, scuffed, exhausted like her. I wanted to belong, she whispered. A quiet ache filled Griffin's chest. He recognized that longing too well. "And what are you up against?" he asked carefully. This time, Malia's answer came without hesitation. "People who don't want me to know the truth," she said. "People who said I was safer not knowing who I really am." The emergency speakers crackled. Another glitch. The officers tensed. Malia kept staring at her shoes. "They told me something terrible would happen if I ever crossed paths with you." "Why me?" Griffin asked. She lifted her head slowly, her expression solemn. "Because they said you'd ruin everything." Griffin's breath caught. Malia didn't blink. "And they said I'd ruin you too." The words hung in the air, heavy, impossible, dangerous. But before Griffin could ask more, Malia whispered a sentence that changed everything. "I think they know we're together." Her words struck deeper than she could ever understand. Griffin had spent years burying the past she was unknowingly dragging back to life. And now here it was, alive, moving, hunting. He drew a slow breath and motioned for the officers to follow as he guided Malia into a quieter corridor behind the ticketing stalls. The emergency lights glowed faintly, painting the walls with long stretches of red. "Griffin," the taller officer whispered, "what's happening tonight feels orchestrated." He didn't deny it. He simply glanced at Malia, then back at the hallway ahead. There were truths he had never spoken. Truths he'd vowed to die with. But tonight, a child's life might depend on breaking that vow. "Malia," he said gently, "there's something you need to know about me. Something most people don't." Her eyes lifted, small, trusting despite her fear. "7 years ago," Griffin began, "someone tried to destroy my name. They leaked false documents, planted evidence, started rumors that I was part of a trafficking ring. It wasn't just a scandal. It was an assassination of everything I'd built." Malia held her breath. Griffin continued, "The person I loved most, her life fell apart because of it. And her daughter vanished." He didn't speak the pain in those last 2 words, but the pain spoke anyway. "That was the night I learned how far powerful people will go to rewrite a story." Malia looked down, like she understood that feeling too well. "Everyone believed the lies," Griffin said. "I lost partners, friends. Half the city turned on me. And the worst part is, I never figured out who planted the evidence." He stared at the forged documents from Malia's backpack, so similar to the ones that destroyed him. "It's happening again," he murmured. Malia stepped closer. "You think the people who took me did this too?" "I think," Griffin said slowly, "they never stopped." A surge of footsteps echoed from the far end of the corridor. Fast, coordinated, intentional. The officers stepped forward, hands near their holsters. Malia's voice shook. "Are they coming for me?" "No," Griffin said firmly, placing himself between her and the sound. "They're coming for us." The footsteps grew louder. Malia looked up at him with a different kind of fear. Fear mixed with realization. "So, I'm part of your story?" she whispered. Griffin didn't get to answer. A metal door at the end of the hall burst open, and the man stepping through it was someone Griffin once trusted with his life. The man standing in the doorway wasn't a stranger. He wasn't an intruder. He wasn't even a disgruntled employee. His name was Calder Rourke, Griffin Lowell's former operations chief. A man who once shook Griffin's hand at every annual review and called him the backbone of this airport. A man who swore loyalty when the world turned its back on Griffin 7 years ago. And a man who vanished without explanation right after the scandal hit. He stepped forward slowly, hands raised like the officers were a minor inconvenience. "Griffin," he said, smiling in a way that didn't reach his eyes, "you look like you've seen a ghost." "You shouldn't be in this wing," Griffin replied, his voice level but charged. Calder shrugged. "Relax. I just came to help you clean up this mess." Malia flinched. She clutched her backpack tighter, shrinking behind Griffin. Calder noticed. "Oh," he murmured. "So this is the girl." Something in the way he said girl made every muscle in Griffin's body tense. "I don't know what you think you're doing," Griffin said, stepping protectively in front of Malia, "but she's under my protection." Calder raised a brow. "Your protection?" Griffin, be serious. "You don't even know who she is." "I know enough." "No," Calder replied, taking another step. "You know exactly nothing. But she knows a lot about you. Isn't that right, Malia?" Malia's breathing grew shallow. Griffin knelt slightly so he could see her face. "Malia," he said softly, "do you know this man?" Her mouth opened, then closed. She stared at the floor. "I've heard his voice," she whispered. "From behind walls." The officer stiffened. Griffin's stomach dropped. Calder sighed as if disappointed. "We could have done this the easy way." "Done what?" Griffin demanded. Calder's smile returned, colder, cleaner, almost practiced. "You think tonight is about a lost child?" "Griffin, tonight is about leverage. And that girl is holding the final piece." Malia shook her head violently. No, I don't know anything." "Oh, you do," Calder replied. "Your caretakers told you stories, didn't they? Told you who to trust, who to avoid, who to fear." Griffin stepped forward. "They told her to fear me." "Why?" Calder smirked. "Because fear is easier to control than truth. And because the truth, Griffin," he leaned in slightly, "is that she was never supposed to meet you." Malia clutched her backpack tighter. "I didn't want to," she said, her voice cracking. "I just wanted to get out. To be free." "Free?" Calder echoed with a laugh. "Malia, you've never been free a single day in your life." The words hit her like a slap. She backed up until she touched the wall. Griffin glared. "What did you do to her?" "What did I do?" Calder repeated, feigning innocence. "Nothing compared to what your enemies planned. Your name, your empire, your entire reputation, is seconds away from collapsing again." He tapped the side of his coat pocket. "You see, Griffin, Malia was never meant to escape the warehouse. She was meant to be found, at the perfect moment, with the perfect evidence. Evidence that would bury you." Malia's knees weakened. Griffin caught her before she fell. "But she ran," Calder continued. "You weren't supposed to see her first. You weren't supposed to hear her voice. And you definitely weren't supposed to care." Griffin steadied Malia, jaw tight with restrained fury. "Why her? Why involve a child?" Calder smiled, soft and poisonous. "Because she's not just a child. She's a link, a name, a history. One you both share, even if you don't realize it yet." Malia's breath hitched. "What does that mean?" Calder tilted his head. "Ask him," he said. "Ask Griffin why your voice sounds familiar." Griffin stiffened. Malia stared at him, searching, hoping, hurting. "Is he lying?" she whispered. Griffin opened his mouth. But the alarms blared again, louder, sharper, urgent. Calder looked almost amused. "Ah, phase 2. "Phase what?" Griffin snapped. Calder turned, walked back toward the door. And before slipping out he said, "It's already begun." And when the emergency shutters dropped from the ceiling, sealing off the corridor, Malia realized Calder hadn't come to threaten them. He'd come to trap them. The metal shutters slammed down with a heavy finality that echoed through the locked corridor. Dust rattled from the hinges. The lights dimmed, then restabilized to a faint, uneasy glow. They were sealed in, and Calder had orchestrated it perfectly. The taller officer rushed to the nearest shutter panel, pounding against it. "Control. Override now. We've got civilians trapped." No response. Not even static. Griffin pulled Malia closer, moving her behind him as he scanned the room for exits. None. Just a sealed corridor built decades ago when the airport's emergency system followed a different logic. One few people still knew how to manipulate. Calder did. Griffin, the shorter officer said urgently, this wasn't random. Someone hacked the network from inside. Griffin didn't answer. His eyes were on the folders protruding from Malia's backpack. Something had been planted. Not just once. Multiple times. Malia, he said gently, I need you to tell me exactly how those documents ended up with you. Her hands trembled as she unzipped the bag again. I told you, they just showed up. Every time I tried to throw them away or hide them, they came back. Came back how? I don't know, she cried, her voice breaking. I'd wake up and they'd be there again. Under my pillow. Inside my jacket. Even in places I knew I didn't put them. The officers exchanged horrified looks. Griffin took one folder and held it up to the emergency light. It was expertly forged, down to the strokes of a signature that wasn't his. This is bigger than a smear campaign, Griffin murmured. They're constructing a narrative. One where Malia looks like a courier, and I look like the mastermind. Malia covered her face. I didn't mean to ruin anything. I just wanted to leave that place. You didn't ruin anything, Griffin said, his tone firm but gentle. You exposed something. A sudden beep cut through the corridor, a faint, repetitive signal. The shorter officer followed the sound. Sir, it's coming from her backpack. Malia froze. Griffin grabbed the bag and quickly found the source. A tiny transmitter stitched into the inner lining. Barely visible. High-end. Military grade. They've been tracking her, Griffin said quietly. Every step she's taken. Malia's knees buckled. I didn't know they could find me anywhere. The taller officer inspected the device. Sir, this isn't just a tracker. It's a data pusher. Meaning? It sends information back, Griffin finished. They know she's with me. The officers went silent. Malia looked like the air had been punched out of her lungs. So they're coming? Yes, Griffin said. And fast. He checked the shutters, tested the locks, calculated. There was no easy way out. But then, a faint mechanical whir sounded through the wall behind them. What's that? One officer asked. Griffin turned slowly. It was a service hatch, an old maintenance panel unlocking on its own, revealing a narrow crawl space. Not by accident. By remote activation. Someone else was in the system. And they were sending Griffin a path. But whether it was a rescue or another trap, Griffin had no way of knowing. The maintenance hatch yawned open like a silent invitation. Narrow, metallic, and just big enough for a child to crawl through. Not a coincidence. Nothing tonight was a coincidence. Griffin stared at the open passage, jaw tight. Whoever controlled the airport systems wasn't acting blindly. Someone knew exactly where he was, where Malia was, and what they were capable of escaping through. This wasn't help. It was choreography. Sir, the taller officer said, voice low, this hatch wasn't active 5 minutes ago. It's been sealed for years. Not anymore, Griffin replied. Malia hugged her knees, trembling. Is that where they want us to go? Griffin crouched beside her. I don't care what they want. I care about keeping you alive. She nodded, but her eyes told the truth. She didn't feel safe anywhere. Not even with him. Not yet. The shorter officer checked the tunnel with a flashlight. It leads toward the old service wing. Cameras don't cover that area. Perfect, Griffin said. Not perfect, the officer corrected. Cameras should cover that area. A chill slithered up Griffin's spine. So the blackout is controlled, he murmured. The officer nodded grimly. Yes. Someone is turning visibility on and off. For a moment, the corridor lights flickered again. Malia flinched, clutching her backpack tighter. Griffin felt more than saw her fear. Malia, he said softly, I need you to tell me one more thing. You said you heard Calder's voice before. Where? Through vents, she whispered. Behind walls. When people came into the warehouse to talk about the transfers. What transfers? She shook her head fast. I don't know. They spoke in pieces, but they said your name. A lot. And they said someone would take your place. The taller officer cursed under his breath. This is a coup. Internal. Someone's trying to destroy you and take the airport. Griffin stood. His silence spoke louder than anger. Suddenly the overhead cameras whirred loudly, then stopped. All of them. Like they'd been frozen on command. Malia backed up against the wall. That sound, they used to make it before someone came in. Griffin exchanged looks with the officers. Someone knew they were about to move. We don't have time, he said. Into the hatch. The officers climbed first, sweeping the narrow passage. Malia hesitated. Her breath shook. Her eyes darted to the shuttered hallway behind them, as if expecting Calder to reappear at any moment. Griffin extended his hand. You're not alone anymore, he said. She took it. Together they crawled through the tight passage. The metal walls felt claustrophobic, carrying echoes of every shuffle and breath. Malia moved with practiced care, like she'd used tunnels before. Halfway through, the lights inside the passage snapped off. Total darkness. Malia gasped, slapping a hand over her mouth to stay silent. Griffin placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. It's okay, he whispered. But it wasn't okay. Because a moment later, every camera in the main corridor behind them powered back on, simultaneously, and the monitors outside the crawlspace displayed a chilling sight. A team of uniformed security agents sweeping the hall. Not Griffin's team. A different squad. Unauthorized. Armed. The taller officer hissed, Sir, those units aren't registered in the system. Griffin's pulse pounded. They know we left the corridor, he said. They're tracking us in real time. Malia's voice cracked. How? The cameras aren't here. No, Griffin whispered, but they don't need cameras. He held up the tiny transmitter they'd pulled from her backpack. They've been using you. Malia's breath trembled. Did I lead them right to us? Griffin didn't answer. He didn't need to. Because ahead of them, deep in the darkness of the passageway, something metallic just slid across the floor, blocking their path forward. The scraping sound rolled through the passage like a whispered threat, sharp, deliberate, final. The officers lifted their flashlights in unison, beams cutting through the darkness. Just ahead, a heavy steel panel sat wedged across the tunnel floor. Not dropped accidentally. Placed. Positioned. Waiting. The shorter officer muttered, Someone's sealing us in one section at a time. They're hurting us, Griffin said. Malia pressed herself against the wall. Why do they want me so badly? Because you know something. Because you're a link. Because your existence threatens someone powerful. Griffin didn't say these things. Not yet. Instead he whispered, they want control. And you're part of the truth they tried to bury. The taller officer tried shifting the steel panel, but it didn't budge. This wasn't dropped from inside the tunnel. It was bolted from the maintenance bay. Griffin clenched his jaw. That means someone's waiting on the other side. Malia's breath hitched. We can't go back either. She was right. The tunnel behind them glowed faintly, movement shadows dancing across the grate. The unauthorized guards were approaching. The shorter officer made a quick decision. We pry it loose. Make our own path. He wedged a utility bar under the edge of the steel plate. The metal screamed as he forced leverage. The noise echoed like a flare through the tunnel. Malia covered her ears. Griffin braced the opposite side to create tension. Every second felt like a second too long. Finally, with a violent clang, the panel popped loose. The officers dragged it aside, creating a narrow opening. "Move," Griffin whispered urgently. Malia crawled through first, heart pounding so loudly she feared it would echo down the pipes. Griffin followed closely, refusing to let more than a foot of space form between them. The new corridor was larger, an old service level with exposed wiring, pipes, and dusty signs pointing to forgotten mechanical rooms. It smelled faintly of oil and old air. Then the lights flickered again. Not randomly in a sequence, left to right, like footsteps. Malia whispered, "They used to do that in the warehouse, before someone came down the hall." Griffin's blood froze. The taller officer checked his tablet for system access. "Sir, someone is overriding us. They're trying to lock this level down too. We need a route that isn't on the main grid," Griffin said. The shorter officer pointed ahead. "There. Emergency shaft. It bypasses the security locks." They ran. Malia wasn't fast, but she was quick, moving with the instinct of someone who'd spent too much of her life escaping danger. Griffin kept a protective hand near her back, guiding without pushing. They reached the emergency shaft just as the lights flickered again, and the hallway behind them dimmed into darkness. The older officer pulled the lever. The door groaned open. But just before they entered, a voice crackled through the malfunctioning intercom system overhead. It wasn't Calder's voice. It was colder. Older. A voice Griffin hadn't heard in 7 years. "Griffin Lowell," it said calmly. "You're interfering again." Malia froze. "No," she whispered. "That's the man who came to the warehouse. He told them when it was time to move us." The officer yanked her into the shaft. The voice continued, calm and precise. "You should have stayed out of this. Now you've put her in even greater danger. Both of you." Griffin stared at the speaker, breath steadying into something colder than fear. "Resolve. You're not getting her back," he said. Silence. That's where you're wrong." The emergency shaft slammed shut behind them, and the last thing Malia heard was the click of someone manually locking the shaft from the outside, trapping them deeper in the maze. The emergency shaft rattled as it descended, fast, shaky, and loud enough to drown Malia's trembling breaths. Griffin kept her close, one arm anchored protectively around her as the officers steadied themselves on the railings. When the shaft finally halted, the doors hissed open to reveal a vast, dimly lit corridor. Dust coated the floor in thick layers. Old directional signs hung crooked on the walls. Air vents hummed with an uneven, almost sickly rhythm. "This level hasn't been used in at least 20 years, the taller officer whispered. "That's why they brought us here," Griffin replied. "No cameras. No staff. No eyes." Malia stepped forward cautiously, staring at the cracked tiles as though they were familiar. Griffin noticed. "You've been somewhere like this before?" he said gently. She nodded slowly. "The warehouse looked like this. Old floors, old air, and doors that only opened from the outside." Her voice broke and she pressed the back of her hand against her mouth. Griffin crouched beside her. "You're safe now." But the truth pressed on him like weight. They weren't safe at all. The officers led the way down the corridor. Their flashlights sliced through the darkness, revealing more abandoned rooms, rusted mechanical stations, discarded equipment, and forgotten maintenance carts. Then the shorter officer stopped abruptly. "Sir, you need to see this." Griffin approached. At first, he didn't understand what he was looking at. Then the realization hit like a punch to the ribs. Pinned across the wall, row after row, were surveillance photos. Dozens, maybe hundreds, of Malia, of Griffin. Of them in different cities, different years, different moments in time. Griffin felt the world tilt. Malia stepped closer, eyes widening. Those are the places I lived. And the places I traveled, Griffin whispered. Some photos showed him walking into meetings. Others showed him at charity events. Some even showed him behind closed airport doors, locations only a handful of staff had access to. They've been tracking you both, the taller officer murmured. For years. Griffin swallowed hard, fighting the burn rising in his throat. What? What do they gain from connecting me to her? The shorter officer pointed to a central board, threaded with red lines linking Malia's childhood addresses to Griffin's business locations, public appearances, and travel dates. It looks like they've been constructing a shared timeline, he said. Something to imply coordination. Malia shook her head desperately. But I didn't know you. They don't care, Griffin said quietly. They want the appearance. Malia wrapped her arms around herself, shrinking into her hoodie. I thought I was just unlucky, she whispered. Always being moved. Always being watched. But they weren't watching me. They were preparing me. Griffin placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. Malia, listen, whatever they planned, it's falling apart because you escaped. That's your strength, not your fault. She looked up at him, cheeks wet but eyes fierce. I didn't run because I was brave. I ran because I thought I was going to disappear. The officers exchanged a grim glance. Then the taller officer stepped closer to another set of pinned documents. Sir, look at this. Griffin leaned in. It was a forged financial statement. His name. An offshore account he'd never heard of. And a transfer order supposedly signed by Malia's caretaker, a woman Griffin didn't know. It's a triangulation, Griffin murmured. They're tying my name to illegal transfers, and tying her to me. The shorter officer added, once the pieces were in place, all they needed was one public moment where you were seen with her. Griffin felt a cold fury rise in his chest. And tonight, he said, I walked right into it. Before anyone could respond, a loud buzzing sound vibrated through the corridor. The lights dimmed, then brightened harshly. Malia grabbed Griffin's arm. That sound? It happened before they moved us, she whispered. Before they took me to the warehouse. The officers pulled their weapons. The buzzing continued, now shifting direction, from deeper inside the abandoned wing. Footsteps echoed. Slow. Confident. Approaching. Griffin stepped in front of Malia. Stay behind me, he said. The footsteps grew louder. A shadow appeared at the far end of the hallway. Tall. Controlled. Moving with purpose. And then, a voice. Griffin, it said. You shouldn't have come here. Because the man walking toward them wasn't Calder. He was someone far higher in Griffin's company. Someone Griffin never imagined would betray him. The figure stepped into the light, and the officers raised their weapons instantly. Griffin's breath caught in his throat. It was Marcus Hale, his chief financial strategist. A man who'd been at Griffin's side for over a decade. A man who helped rebuild the airport's reputation after the scandal. A man Griffin trusted with decisions worth billions. And he was here. In the abandoned wing. Smiling. Put your weapons down, Marcus said calmly. If I wanted you dead, we wouldn't be having a conversation. Griffin stepped forward. What are you doing down here? How long have you been part of this? Marcus gestured toward the wall of photos and documents. Long enough to know you were never going to give up control willingly. You framed me, Griffin said quietly. No, Marcus corrected. I replaced you. The framing was just a necessary step. Malia hid behind Griffin, trembling. Marcus's eyes drifted toward her. And you, little catalyst, you did your part well. Malia's breath hitched. I didn't do anything. Oh, but you did, Marcus said, almost amused. You existed. That was enough. Griffin stepped between them. If you touch her. Marcus raised a hand. Relax. I don't hurt children. I just use them. The officers bristled. Griffin's jaw clenched. Why her? Why build this insane connection between us? Marcus walked slowly toward the red-threaded board, tracing one line with his finger. Her mother worked for someone very important, he said. Someone who wanted a bargaining chip. When she disappeared, I realized the timing could serve my purposes. Griffin felt the world sway. What does she have to do with me? Marcus turned, his smile cold. Everything. When the scandal hit years ago, you didn't fall as hard as they wanted. People still trusted you. But if a child, especially one tied to a missing woman, walked into your life with forged evidence, the public would finish the job for us. Malia shook her head violently. I didn't know. I never knew any of this. Of course you didn't, Marcus said. That was the brilliance. You were the innocent thread. Untouched. Unaware. When the moment came, Griffin would look guilty and you would look like the victim. Griffin stepped closer. And called her? The warehouse. The tracking device. All part of the scaffolding, Marcus replied. He handles the dirtier work. I handle the strategy. The taller officer snarled, Why come face us yourself? Marcus shrugged. Because the game is almost over. He pulled a small remote from his jacket pocket. Griffin tensed. What are you doing? Marcus pressed a button. Every emergency light in the abandoned wing shut off, except one. The bulb flickered above a secondary door at the end of the hall. Behind it, mechanical locks began unlocking. One by one. Slowly. Deliberately. That door, Marcus said, leads to the central maintenance pit. Hardly anyone knows it exists. A perfect place for accidents. Malia grabbed Griffin's sleeve. Please don't let him take me. Marcus smirked. Oh, I don't need to take you. I just need the world to see you with him. One more time. In the wrong place. Griffin stepped in front of her. You're not touching her. Marcus chuckled softly. We'll see. He turned and walked toward the unlocking door, moving with the confidence of someone who believed the story was already written. The last lock clicked open, and as the door slowly creaked inward, a gust of cold air rushed out, carrying the unmistakable scent of a place where people disappeared. The cold gust that rushed from the newly opened door seemed to breathe against their skin, carrying the weight of secrets buried far below the airport. Even the officers, trained, composed, controlled, felt the air shift into something darker. Malia clung to Griffin's sleeve. Her knees trembled, her breath coming in fast, shallow pulls. She stared at the black opening like it was a mouth waiting to swallow her whole. Griffin crouched beside her. Listen to me, he whispered. You're not going through that door. Not tonight. Not ever. She nodded, but fear still clung to her eyes. Then Marcus Hale's voice echoed from the darkness. You don't have to send her in. You just have to follow. The lights flickered violently, once, twice, then steadied into a dim, pulsing glow. The taller officer raised his weapon. Sir, he's trying to separate us from command. If we lose this level, we lose communication. We already lost it, the shorter officer replied. He's isolating the grid one wing at a time. Another gust swept from the open doorway, colder, deeper, almost hollow. Malia tugged on Griffin's coat. That smell, she whispered. It's like the warehouse, the basement, where they kept. She swallowed the rest. Griffin's jaw tightened. We're not going in, he said. From the shadows, Marcus laughed softly. Of course you are. You're predictable, Griffin. You chase answers. You chase justice. And now you'll chase her truth, straight into the dark. Griffin stepped toward the doorway. The officers blocked him immediately. Sir, no, the taller officer said. That pit was used before the renovations. It's unstable. If he gets you down there, he can trap you permanently. Marcus's silhouette lingered just beyond the threshold. Or, he said, maybe the truth you've been running from is waiting inside. Malia pulled Griffin back. Don't leave me, she whispered, voice cracking. He turned to her, placing both hands on her shoulders. I will never leave you. Not now, not later, not when this is over. Do you understand? Her eyes brimmed with tears, but she nodded. Another metallic rumble sounded overhead. Then the emergency shutters behind them began to lower, the ones that initially sealed the abandoned level. They're closing off the corridor, the shorter officer shouted. Marcus stepped deeper into the pit room, his voice echoing. You have two choices, follow me, or wait for Calder's team to reach you first. That chilled the air even more than the gust. Calder's guards. The unauthorized units sweeping the airport. They were getting closer. The taller officer swung around. Sir, we need an exit. Now. Griffin looked up and noticed something the others hadn't. High above the corridor, barely visible under a layer of old dust, a ventilation grate hung slightly crooked. Not part of the modern system. Left over from the original structure. Unmapped, unpowered, unmonitored. A real escape. We go up, Griffin said. Now. The shorter officer blinked. Sir, that vent isn't on the blueprint. That's why it will work. The two officers shoved an old crate beneath the wall and helped Malia climb up. She pulled herself into the vent with trembling arms. Hurry, she whispered. The shutters. The metal slats behind them were almost halfway down, grinding slowly but inevitably. Griffin motioned for the officers to climb in next. They hesitated, glancing toward the open door where Marcus had disappeared. You sure about this, sir? I'm not walking into his trap, Griffin growled. We go up. The officers climbed into the vent. Griffin went last. Just as he lifted himself inside, the emergency shutters slammed fully shut with a deafening clang. Darkness swallowed the corridor. Only the vent remained open, a narrow, winding channel that led somewhere above the hidden wing. Malia crawled ahead, her small hands gripping the metal grid. Despite her fear, she moved with determination. You okay? Griffin whispered behind her. She nodded, though her voice trembled. I've crawled through vents before. In other places. When I had to hide. Griffin felt his chest tighten. Her past wasn't a series of misfortunes. It was a survival manual she never asked for. As they crawled deeper into the vent system, the metal groaned beneath them. The officers tried to keep quiet, but every movement echoed through the narrow space. We need to move fast, the shorter officer whispered. If they track the shaft. Malia suddenly stopped. Completely. Griffin almost bumped into her. Malia? What is it? She pointed at the vent's corner where a faint red light flickered. A motion sensor. Dust covered, but active. Griffin's pulse spiked. Marcus had planned for this too. Before he could react, a loud click echoed through the metal walls. What was that? Malia whispered. The taller officer swore. A trigger. We hit a trigger. Suddenly, the vent trembled. A mechanical hum rose beneath them. Griffin realized what was happening. They're sealing the vents. Malia's eyes widened. We'll get stuck. No, Griffin said, we're getting out. He surged forward past the officers, pushing toward the faint light ahead. The vent walls began to close. Malia crawled faster, desperation fueling her. Griffin shouted behind her, "Don't stop. Whatever you do, keep moving." The vent narrowed. The metal creaked. And as they reached the final turn, a burst of cold outside air hit their faces. Malia gasped. "There's an opening." But just as Griffin reached the edge, a silhouette appeared at the end of the vent. Not Marcus, not Calder. Someone else. Someone Malia recognized instantly. She froze. "Not him," she whispered. "Please, not him." Because the man blocking the exit wasn't an enemy from Griffin's past. He was the one who oversaw Malia's captivity. The silhouette crouched at the mouth of the vent, a small flashlight turning his features into sharp, menacing planes. He wore a dark utility vest, heavy boots, and an expression that Malia knew far too well. The man who enforced obedience. The man who monitored the children. The man who delivered the coded messages. His name was Daxon Price. And Malia's entire body recoiled the moment she saw him. "No," she whimpered, shrinking back even though there was nowhere to run. "He's not supposed to be here. He's not supposed to be this close." Griffin pulled her behind him, shielding her with his entire frame. Daxon tilted his head. "Hello, Malia." His voice was calm, unnervingly calm. "That vent looks familiar on you. Brought back memories, did it?" Malia's breathing broke into ragged pieces. "Don't talk to her," Griffin snapped. Daxon ignored him. "You always were the one who ran. Had to keep an eye on you more than the others." Malia's knees buckled. "Please stop." Daxon smirked. "I'm not here to hurt you. That's never been my job." He tapped the side of his headset. "I'm here to deliver messages. You remember the code, don't you?" Malia flinched violently, because that code wasn't just a phrase. It was conditioning. A signal that meant obedience no matter the cost. Griffin sensed her body collapsing inward, her old trauma taking hold. His voice softened but sharpened too, a protective edge threading through it. "Malia, look at me." She tried, but her eyes kept drifting back to Daxon like a magnet she couldn't break. "Malia," Griffin repeated, firmer now. "He doesn't control you anymore." Her lips trembled. "But the code, if he says the code." "He won't," Griffin said. "And even if he does, it has no power here." Daxon chuckled. "You think you can undo years of training with a nice speech?" Griffin turned cold. "Try saying it. And see what I do to you." The flashlight beam bounced across the vent walls as Daxon shifted his stance. "Oh, I won't need to," he said, "because she still remembers what it means." He leaned in slightly. "But if you want me to say it, I will." Malia squeezed her eyes shut, bracing as if she were about to be struck. Griffin tensed like a loaded spring. Then Daxon said the words in a slow whisper, words Malia had heard hundreds of times in captivity. "Come home, little echo." Malia broke. Not into panic. Into stillness, a deep, terrified obedience that froze her bones. Griffin grabbed her shoulders. "Malia, listen to me. That code is dead. You're not going anywhere with him." But she barely heard him. The words had triggered the old reflexes, the ones drilled into her for years. Daxon smiled. "See? She remembers." Griffin's rage was a quiet, terrifying thing. "You're done giving her orders." Daxon's voice shifted from mocking to cold. "I'm not here for orders. I'm here to retrieve the asset." "She's not an asset," Griffin growled. "She is to the ones who own her story," Daxon replied. "And tonight you interfered." He reached into his vest, not for a weapon, for a small device with a blinking green light. The officers immediately drew their guns. "Put it down," the taller officer barked. Jackson didn't. He pressed a button. A tone echoed through the vent, low, vibrating, unnatural. Malia gasped, hands flying to her ears. "No, no, no, please." Griffin wrapped his arms around her, pulling her against him. "I've got you. You're okay." But she was shaking violently. The code tone wasn't meant to hurt physically. It was meant to command. A voice, digitally warped, played through the device. "Malia Carter. Return. Now." Her body jerked forward instinctively. Griffin held her back. The officers shouted. Jackson spoke over the chaos, expression calm as ever. "You can't save her from what she was trained to follow." Griffin's voice dropped low, dark, and certain. "Watch me." He lunged. Jackson scrambled back, dropping the device. It clattered in the vent, its blinking light flashing rapidly. Malia collapsed into Griffin's arms, shaking. Behind them, somewhere deep in the tunnels, the mechanical hum began again, louder this time. Something big was activating. And when the ground beneath them trembled, Griffin realized the next stage of the operation had begun, and they were still trapped inside the maze. The ground shuddered again, stronger this time, vibrating through the vent walls like the airport itself was waking up to something sinister. Dust rained softly from the metal joints above them. Malia pressed her palms to her ears, curled into herself, trying to block out the lingering echo of that command tone. Her whole body shook, not from the cold but from years of conditioning clawing to take control. Griffin held her tight, speaking softly, urgently, directly into her ear. "You're not going anywhere. Not with him. Not with anyone. You choose where you go now." But Malia's breath came in short, frantic bursts. I can't stop shaking," he said the code, he said, "my body just—" "I know," Griffin said, voice trembling despite his control. "But what you do next is yours, not theirs." Behind them, the officers kept their weapons trained on the vent mouth. Jackson had disappeared after Griffin lunged, retreating into the maze before they could catch him. But he hadn't left quietly. His smile echoed louder than his footsteps. "He's not alone out there," the taller officer murmured. "Listen." They heard it now, layers of noise traveling through the old metal system. Heavy machinery powering up. Ventilation fans shifting airflow. Doors unlocking. Doors locking. Multiple footsteps. The entire forgotten wing awakening. "They're mobilizing," the shorter officer said. "Someone activated a full-level reroute." Griffin looked at Malia again. "Can you crawl?" She nodded, though her hands trembled. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I shouldn't have slowed us down." Griffin pulled her gently into a sitting position. "Don't ever apologize for what they did to you. I should be stronger." "Malia," he said softly, firmly, "you survived them. That's strength." Her eyes lifted just a little. Just enough for a spark to return. The officers signaled. It was time to move. They crawled deeper into the vent system, navigating turns shaped by years of dust and decay. Malia stayed between the officers, and Griffin remained at her back like a shield. But the deeper they crawled, the louder the noise became. A grinding hum pulsed beneath them. The metal walls vibrated. "What is that?" Malia whispered. "Something below us," the shorter officer said. "A freight mechanism? Or an old pressure system?" "No," Griffin said slowly. "It's a lift." The sound grew sharper. Faster. The taller officer cursed. "Sir, they're sending something up to this level." Malia's breath hitched. "Like what they used at the warehouse?" Griffin followed her gaze, toward a faint shaft of light splitting through the vent floor. He looked through the slit. A large industrial platform was rising, slowly, heavily. On it stood 4 men, armed, focused, and climbing straight toward them. Malia's voice cracked. "They're coming for me." Griffin turned to her, holding her face between his hands. "Look at me. Right here." Her tear-filled eyes met his. "You said you weren't strong," he whispered. "But you ran. You survived. You broke out when no one else could. You found me, not because they planned it, but because you refused to give up." A tear fell. Then another. "You are stronger than anything chasing you." She swallowed hard. "What if they catch me?" "They won't." "How do you know?" "Because I'm not losing you," Griffin said. "Not again." Her lips parted. "Again?" He almost answered. Almost. But the platform slammed into place beneath them with a massive metallic clang. The officers grabbed their weapons. Griffin lifted Malia and pushed her forward. "Go," he whispered. "Now. Don't look back." She crawled faster this time. Determined. Fueled by the small, growing belief that maybe she wasn't powerless after all. The tunnel forked. The officers motioned right. Griffin moved to follow. But the vent beneath him reverberated as one of the men struck it from below. The metal dented. "Go!" Griffin shouted. The officers dove forward. Malia screamed for him. The vent wall buckled inward under another hit. Griffin shouted again, voice thick with urgency. "Run!" And as Malia crawled away, tears streaming, she saw the metal floor beneath Griffin collapse, sending him plunging into the darkness below. Griffin hit the lower level with a brutal thud, the wind knocked out of him. Pain flashed through his ribs, his elbow, his shoulder. For a moment he couldn't breathe. Above him, he heard Malia scream his name. He forced himself upright. "I'm okay," he shouted. But he wasn't okay. And the men from the rising platform were already surrounding him. 4 figures. No hesitation. Driven by orders, not conscience. The tallest one stepped forward. "Griffin Lowell. You're coming with us." Griffin wiped blood from his lip. "Not without her." The man smirked. "You misunderstand. You're not here as her protector. You're here as her liability." Before they could grab him, a sharp mechanical buzz filled the chamber. A spotlight snapped on overhead, illuminating the concrete pit. Then a familiar voice echoed through the intercom, smooth, confident, venomous. "Marcus Hale." "Stand down," Marcus ordered. "He comes to me." The 4 men backed away immediately. Griffin looked up toward the glass panel overlooking the pit. Marcus was there, watching, smiling. "Welcome, Griffin," he said. "I admit, I wasn't sure you'd fall through the vent. But fate has a sense of humor." Griffin glared at him. "What do you want?" "Simple," Marcus said. "Your signature." He held up a document. "A transfer of ownership of the airport. Griffin's airport." "You've lost your mind?" Griffin said. "No," Marcus replied calmly. "I've found clarity. You stand in the way of progress. You stand in the way of profit. And worst of all, you stand in the way of the story we've been building." Griffin's voice hardened. "This is about your ego." "This," Marcus said, tapping the glass, "is about power. You should recognize the pattern. You lived it 7 years ago. The old scandal. The false accusations. The destroyed reputation. You," Griffin whispered. "It was you. Back then. All of it." Marcus smiled. "What can I say? You were in my way then too." Griffin felt rage burn through the shock. "And Malia?" he asked. "What did she ever do to you?" Marcus's smile twisted. "She existed." Griffin stepped forward. "Explain." Marcus leaned closer to the microphone. "She is the proof," he said. The living evidence that your past isn't dead. She was the perfect anchor to tie your hands with. A girl with no stable history, no records, no defenders. Easy to manipulate. Easy to place. Griffin's blood ran cold. You used her. I shaped her, Marcus corrected. From afar. Through people willing to do what I couldn't be seen doing. Jackson. Calder. Others before them. Griffin's fists tightened. She's a child. Marcus shrugged. And children grow. Stories grow with them. I invested in her future because she was useful. Griffin's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. What did you do to her mother? Marcus froze for a split second. Then he smiled again, more slowly this time. You always were perceptive. Griffin's heart pounded. Malia's mother worked for you, Griffin said. Didn't she? Marcus clasped his hands behind his back. Worked? Past tense? Griffin clenched his jaw. Where is she? Marcus tilted his head. Unavailable. Griffin surged forward, but the guards held him back. Marcus continued, voice calm as ice. She uncovered something she shouldn't have. We repurposed the situation. Used the disappearance to your disadvantage. Used the child to finish the job later. Griffin's world tilted. You're evil, he said. I'm efficient, Marcus replied. And tonight, efficiency demands a resolution. Sign the transfer. Walk away quietly. And the girl? Well, she'll be placed where she can't cause more narrative complications. Griffin's rage spiked. You're not taking her. Marcus sighed. I'm tired of your moral theatrics. Bring him. The guard stepped forward. Griffin braced, ready to fight until he couldn't breathe. But just then, a deafening alarm tore through the pit. Red lights flashed. Marcus spun around in shock. What? The intercom crackled. A voice came through. Not a guard. Not Calder. Not Daxon. A child's voice. Trembling but brave. Get away from him. Marcus's eyes widened. How? Above the glass panel, Malia appeared, face pale, hoodie torn, eyes blazing with a courage she didn't know she had. I'm not your echo anymore, she said. Because the next alarm wasn't triggered by Malia. It was triggered by a full system override someone else had launched, and the entire airport began shutting down around them. The entire pit shuddered as the full system override detonated through the airport's power grid. Sirens wailed in layers. Fire alarms, security alerts, mechanical warnings, each one overlapping the next until the air vibrated with chaos. Marcus Hale whirled toward the control console, panic bleeding through his composure. Who triggered that? Who's in my system? Malia stood above him like a silhouette carved out of defiance. She was shaking, terrified, but she did not step back. Not this time. Not ever again. I did, she said, her voice small, but steady. Griffin felt pride punch through his chest so hard he almost forgot the guards holding him down. Marcus's face twisted. Impossible. The override requires master credentials. Malia blinked slowly. Then maybe your people shouldn't have whispered the passwords around the children. Marcus's expression cracked. You taught us more than you meant to, she continued. Even when you thought we weren't listening. The guards froze. Griffin seized the moment, elbowing one in the ribs, breaking free of the second, scrambling to his feet. Pain stabbed through his side, but he didn't stop. He stood between Malia and Marcus without thinking, without hesitating, powered by something fierce and unbreakable. Malia, he said, voice thick with emotion, you did that. She nodded shakily. I remember the commands. The ones they used at the warehouse. The override sequence wasn't hard. They repeated it every night before they locked us in. Griffin swallowed the anger burning in his throat. No child should ever know what a system override looked like. Marcus slammed a palm onto the console. You have no idea what you've done. The airport will shut down. Emergency crews will flood this level. That's the point, Griffin said. Your maze won't protect you anymore. Marcus's smirk returned, weak but defiant. You forget who built this story, Griffin. You forget who people trust. I haven't forgotten, Griffin replied. But you underestimated one thing. And what's that? Marcus spat. The difference between a girl you tried to break and a girl who survived you. Malia stepped forward, gripping the railing, voice shaking but strong. You can't control me anymore. A deep mechanical roar echoed through the pit as the system began sealing lower levels. Emergency doors slammed shut. Thick barriers slid into place. The guards panicked. We need to get out, one shouted. Marcus backed away, eyes darting. This wasn't the plan. This wasn't supposed to happen. Griffin moved closer. Your plan was to disappear me. To use Malia as the narrative rope. But you forgot that the truth doesn't vanish just because you hide it. Marcus grabbed the transfer document again, thrusting it toward Griffin. Sign it now. Before security gets here. Before the cameras reboot. If the public sees you down here, the public will see exactly what you built, Griffin interrupted. And what you did to her mother. Marcus's face drained of color. Griffin stepped forward, close enough to look him in the eyes. You controlled the story for 7 years, he said. Tonight you lose control. Marcus lunged for Malia in a last desperate attempt to seize leverage, but Griffin slammed him back with a force fueled by fear, anger, and something paternal he didn't have a name for. Marcus hit the railing hard and stumbled. Before he could recover, the taller officer burst through the upper hatch with reinforcements behind him. Sir, evacuation teams are inbound. We need to secure the suspect. Marcus looked around wildly. The guards who once followed him now stepped back from him. The airport, his stage, was falling into Griffin's hands, one override signal at a time. Malia climbed down the ladder and rushed to Griffin. He caught her instantly, pulling her into his arms. You found your voice, he whispered. Tears slid down her cheeks. I'm not their echo anymore. Above them, the override lights flashed brighter. Red, white, red, white. Then the final announcement boomed overhead. System control returning to primary authority. Marcus froze. Primary authority? He repeated in disbelief. No, that can't be. He looked down at Griffin. Griffin raised his wrist, revealing his emergency override band. I built the failsafe before you ever touched this place. Marcus stumbled backward, realizing too late that every trap he'd set had just snapped shut on himself. The officers grabbed him. Malia wiped her tears. Griffin held her close. But as the alarms died, Malia asked the question Griffin had been avoiding since the moment he heard her voice. What really happened to my mother? The pit vibrated with the thrum of emergency power as officers hauled Marcus away. His shouts echoed through the chamber, angry, desperate, unraveling. But Malia didn't watch him leave. She only watched Griffin. What happened to her? She asked again, her voice quiet but trembling with the weight of a truth she'd carried too long. Griffin knelt so they were eye to eye. Her face was streaked with grime and tears, her hoodie torn, her hands shaking, but there was strength in her gaze. A strength he recognized. Malia, he began slowly, your mother didn't abandon you. Her breath caught. She didn't run. She didn't lose you. She didn't give you away. Tears welled instantly. Then, where is she? Griffin swallowed, feeling the ache of a truth 7 years buried. She was investigating the people Marcus worked for. She discovered the trafficking pipeline before it existed. She tried to expose them. His voice tightened. They silenced her. And they took you. Malia's world cracked in a single breath. All this time, she whispered, I thought she chose to leave. Griffin shook his head firmly. She loved you. You were her whole world. And they hurt her because of it. She covered her mouth as a sob escaped, but it wasn't the sob of a child breaking. It was the sob of a child understanding. Why didn't anyone tell me? She cried. Because they needed you to feel alone, Griffin said softly. Alone people are easier to control. Her shoulders trembled. Is she gone? Griffin didn't speak, because the silence was the answer. Malia stepped into him and hugged him with all the strength left in her small body. He held her tightly, anchoring her through a storm that could have drowned her. You survived what they meant to destroy you, he whispered. That means something. It means your mother didn't lose. She pulled back, wiping her eyes. Then neither will I. Griffin felt something shift inside him. Respect, pride, and something deeper. The officers approached. Sir, the upper levels are clear. Cameras are restored. The entire airport is locking onto your authority. Malia looked up at Griffin. What happens now? She asked. Griffin placed a steady hand on her shoulder. Now, he said, the world hears the truth. And you get your life back. But before they could leave the pit, the ground shook again, this time from a blast far above them, signaling that the story wasn't done yet. The blast above them rattled dust from the ceiling, sending tiny clouds drifting through the pit like shaken snow. But this time no one panicked. The officers checked their comms, steady, secure, controlled. It's the main terminal shutters unlocking, the taller officer said. Emergency crews are clearing the upper floors. We're free to move. Griffin nodded and turned to Malia. She looked smaller now, not because fear had returned, but because exhaustion was settling into her bones. She had survived the longest night of her life, and it showed. Come on, Griffin said softly. Let's get you out of here. He lifted her into the elevator built for maintenance crews, an old metal cage that creaked as it rose. Every passing level brought them closer to light, to air, to safety. And every level left the darkness further behind. When the doors finally opened into the main terminal, Malia blinked hard against the brightness. Fire crews hurried past. Officers barked orders into radios. Passengers who had been evacuated earlier waited anxiously behind barricades. But to Malia none of it existed. Her eyes drifted to the metal bench at gate C-14, the same one where she had curled up, alone and scared, only hours earlier. She walked toward it slowly. Griffin stayed a step behind her, giving her space, letting her face the place where everything had begun. She touched the cold metal lightly. The overhead light hummed. The air smelled faintly of airport coffee and engine fuel. And she exhaled. I thought I was going to disappear here, she whispered. I thought no one would ever know my name. Griffin stepped beside her. But they will. And not because you were lost, but because you were found. She looked up at him, eyes tired but shining. Do you think my mom would be proud of me? Griffin's voice softened. Malia, she would be amazed by you. Tears welled again, but this time they didn't fall from fear. They fell from release, from the quiet understanding that she had survived something meant to erase her. Emergency lights flickered overhead as technicians restored more systems. The officers regrouped. Paramedics waited to examine her. But Malia didn't move from the bench. Everything started here, she said. And everything changes here, Griffin replied. Malia took one more deep breath and whispered almost to herself, I'm not running anymore. For the first time she sounded like she believed it. Griffin placed a hand gently on her back. Let's go tell the world what happened. But as they turned toward the waiting officials, Griffin saw a familiar envelope tucked beneath the bench, one that hadn't been there before. Griffin froze. The envelope was crisp, white, and placed too deliberately to be overlooked. The officers reacted immediately. One approached cautiously, gloved hands steady, eyes sharp. "Sir," he said, "it's addressed to you." Malia stiffened beside Griffin. "Is it from them?" Griffin crouched, picked it up carefully, and turned it over. 3 words were written on the front. "For the truth." No signature. No insignia. Just intention. He opened it slowly. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a photograph, creased at the edges, taken years ago. A woman, smiling gently, holding a baby in her arms. Malia stepped closer, breath catching in her throat. "That's her," she whispered. "That's my mom." Griffin's heart constricted. The photo wasn't staged, wasn't weaponized. It looked real, warm, ordinary human. A moment stolen from a life they tried to erase. On the back of the photo, one handwritten line. "She never stopped fighting for you." Malia pressed the picture to her chest, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. "Who left this?" Griffin asked the officers. They shook their heads. No one had seen anyone near the bench. No cameras had rebooted in time. No witnesses had reported a thing. Maybe it was someone who had helped her mother. Maybe someone who regretted being part of the machine. Maybe someone who had watched from the shadows and finally chose a side. But the truth didn't matter right now. What mattered was the look in Malia's eyes, a look that blended grief, hope, anger, and something brand new. Belonging. Griffin placed a hand on her shoulder. "This doesn't erase what they took from you. But it's a start." She nodded, wiping her face. "It feels real. For the first time, something feels real." He guided her toward the officials waiting near the security checkpoint. They parted the crowd to let them through. Griffin Lowell, the billionaire whose empire nearly collapsed tonight, and the girl who survived becoming a pawn in someone else's story. Reporters called out. Flashbulbs blinked. Officers documented the downfall of Marcus Hale and the network beneath him. Malia kept close to Griffin's side, but she no longer looked lost. She looked ready. A calm settled over the terminal, soft and heavy, like the first breath after a storm. Griffin leaned down. "Whatever comes next, you won't face it alone." She looked up at him. "Do you promise?" He didn't hesitate. "Yes." They stepped forward together, past the gate, past the bench, past the ghosts of the night. A new journey waited on the other side of the cameras. A journey built on truth, on courage, on the stories they refused to let die. And as the narrator's voice softens, warm, reflective, human, the lesson forms gently around them. Strength isn't found in never breaking. It's found in rising after someone tried to break you. Malia Carter rose tonight. And she wasn't done rising. And if stories like this remind you that every life has worth, stay with us. Because here at Slush Stories we tell them, not just to move you, but to remind you that hope always finds a way.